Prime Minister has made it clear that ministers won't be allowed to campaign against him in the European referendum. He said at the G7 summit that his renegotiation would be successful and everyone in government would be expected to campaign with him for a yes vote to stay in the EU whenever that vote comes. His officials were saying afterwards that he would expect anybody who wanted to campaign for no to leave the government. Well, the former Europe Minister David Davis joins us now. Mr Davis, what's your interpretation of what the Prime Minister said?
Well, it's pretty plain. There's not much room to interpret that anybody who's going to vote against and campaign against continued membership of the European Union would have to leave government, which is something of a change from what was presumed, I think, really right up to the election. And in my view, a rather unwise change.
Well, there's something else as well. Surely he's saying more strongly than he ever has before that whatever the result of his renegotiation, it's going to be enough for him to recommend yes.
Well, we've veered in and out of that over the course of the last year.
I've never seen him saying it quite so strongly as this.
A number of people, ranging from Boris Johnson to me, have said, "Well, this is not a wise negotiating stance." So yes, you're right. There is that element to it. But in my view, Jim, the issue here, which is most important, is the change in the assumption of what people in government can do. I mean, I'm not even sure of the constitutional propriety of it. Now, it's obviously
well, there isn't any constitutional precedent except Harold
Wilson.
Wilson.
There is. There's one. There's Harold Wilson.
Yeah, but that's not constitutional. That was just a political... he had to do it because his party was falling apart.
Let me put the point to you. That the collective responsibility is there for a very good reason. It's there to ensure that the normal mechanism of government works on a day-by-day basis. You don't have people falling out all along the way. But even that was operated with a degree of sensitivity. I can remember from my days as a government whip, times when we had to say, well, OK, we'll let so-and-so not vote on this or abstain himself or whatever, because it was so sensitive, either to constituency or to matter of principle.
Well, that parliamentary democracy has to have give and take.
Of course. But this is a once-in-a-lifetime, history-changing event for which many people, and for many people, it's the reason they come into politics. Not mine, but for some it is. And yet the only people who will not have the freedom to vote and speak on it, according to this, are ministers in the government, which of itself is extraordinary. That will likely lead, I'm sorry to say, to some people resigning from the government or being fired.
You mean before... Well, there's an interesting point here. I don't want to interrupt you too often, but there's a very interesting point here. Do you think that challenge is to them now or just at the moment of the campaign?
I think it's both, in truth. I mean, some people will feel that this is a change of policy that I don't know how much they've discussed it internally in cabinet, obviously. But you're going to have decent people who care deeply about the country's future. And this is, for some of them, the biggest issue. And they're going to end up resigning from government for that simple.
You mean somebody like IDS?
I'm not going to name individuals because I haven't spoken to any of them. And I'm not a member of any group with any of them, so I can't really responsibly do that. But people can make their own conclusions. And up until now, I mean, let me say, I'm not a member of these groups I see written about in the weekend press, the Conservatives from Britain and so on. I actually said I don't want to join them. Why? Because I know what 1992 felt like. The time of the great Maastricht debate and so on. And I thought the party had come to a conclusion amongst itself that we're going to have a decent debate, but it wasn't going to be acrimonious.
Do you think we're back into that now?
Well, there's a risk. I mean, what we may end up doing is turning a decent debate into a bitter argument. One of the great things, and you're quite right, I mean, Harold Wilson used it as a lightning rod. And that's not his primary purpose, but it would act, a referendum would act as a lightning rod to take some of the heat and the anger out of the parliamentary debate. The final thing, really, is the point you sort of started with, and that is, up until a month ago, we all felt, well, we're going to go through the negotiation. Yes. Prime Minister is absolutely convinced he can deliver on this negotiation, sufficient to persuade people that we should stay in. I was willing to give him the benefit of the doubt for that. I think most of, if not all of my party were, as well as much of the country. This doesn't show a great deal of confidence in the outcome of those negotiations that he has to say now, my way or the highway. Stay and obey the line or leave.
David Davis, thanks very much.